This is Anna Garcia-Ashley. Can the IT people hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
I apologize. I am going to have to introduce Deepak again because I just did, and the IT were not moving the slideshow. So if we can get the first slide to let people know our speaker that have been sent to you. Most of us know that Deepak is a great ally and partner of the Gamaliel Network. He's the executive director of the Center for Community Change, which is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to develop the power and capacity of low-income people, especially low-income people of color, to change the policies and institutions that affect their lives. We're very honored to have Deepak. Welcome. Before I turn it over to Deepak, who's going to give us where exactly the fiscal cliff showdown is at right now in D.C., what the impact that we need to have when we arrive there next week, and what to look forward at the end of the year, and especially in January, and frame it for us. I will give you a couple of instructions. We are going to run his presentation for 20 minutes. Then we're going to open it up. You can either raise your hands by clicking on the raising your hands or write your questions in the question box. And the IT are going to make sure that he gets all the questions. We have 10 minutes for Q&A from Deepak. Then he needs to run to another engagement. Then we will move on to the campaign department, who will walk through the 2 days in D.C. and especially the action and what we're going to do on the Hill. So I'm just going to warn you that if you get your phone and if you're on the computer, we're going to have a slide show going. But if you're on the phone, please keep it on mute because we can hear everything. I'm going to turn it over to friend and colleague and supporter, Deepak. How are you?
Thank you, Anna. I'm great, and it's wonderful to be with everyone here. I want to say thank you, Anna, for your incredible leadership in this network and in this movement for justice. It's a real privilege to work with you, and to say to my colleagues and the Gamaliel Foundation Network all over the country that I'm very inspired and moved by the Fire of Faith campaign that you've launched and the incredible work that you are doing all over the country. I know many of you did incredible work in the elections to ensure that the electorate in America looks like America. The bad news is that you can't rest, and I know you are not resting. You will be arriving in Washington, D.C. right on time. We are in the midst of one of the most important debates about economic and social policy in our country's history. It's arguably just as important as the debates that we had in the 1930s that resulted in the New Deal, or the debates that we had in the 1960s that resulted in the Civil Rights Revolution and the Great Society programs. So this is an incredibly important moment, and I want to thank Gamaliel for its work in setting the stage for this moment and for continuing the fight and not letting the organizing stop with the election. So what is the fiscal cliff? What is happening right now? Why are we having this very important debate that will shape the future landscape of social policy in this country for a generation now? So some of the technical reasons, which you're well aware of, are that we are having the fiscal showdown now, are that the Bush tax cuts are scheduled to expire at the end of 2012, that there were major budget cuts that were included in last year's budget deal between the President and Congress that are slated to take effect at the end of 2012. These are automatic cuts in domestic discretionary spending and cuts in military spending. They're called sequestration. That's the word that's used to describe these automatic cuts that go into effect if Congress does not do anything about them at the end of this year. In addition, the debt ceiling will need to be raised sometime early in 2013. Unemployment benefits will revert back to 26 weeks, despite the massive joblessness and the difficulty that many of our folks have finding work today in many parts of the country. The extended unemployment benefits will expire. So for all these reasons, a number of decisions need to be made in the next few months. These triggers were set up by the previous Congress, and they're really intended to create the conditions for a so-called, quote, grand bargain, unquote, in which Democrats agree to trillions of dollars of cuts in domestic spending and social insurance spending in exchange for potential concessions by Republicans on tax increases. And it's important to say here that however the fiscal showdown is addressed in the lame duck session of Congress in the next 4 weeks, we're in really for a debate over the next couple of years about tax policy, about entitlements, about domestic spending, about our priorities in the budget of the country. This is not going to be a quick fight that will wrap up in just a few weeks' time. I also want to say that really the showdown is the result of a developing consensus among elites in the country, the people who make the major decisions in our country, that the major challenge is deficits, that we have to get spending under control, that we have to reduce the deficits. Now what that means is really that the fancy word for that is austerity, the idea that we have to dramatically reduce the footprint, the role, the spending by government, that will restore economic confidence and lead to growth. Now, we hold a very different view that what we really face is a jobs crisis in America. This focus on austerity, it creates a challenging environment for all of us who want to see action on jobs, wages, unemployment, foreclosures, worker rights, and other disparities. We want to advance racial equity and justice in the nation. So part of our task here is to put forward a different story, an alternative to the austerity paradigm that really lifts up the question of job creation and the paradigm of shared prosperity, the idea that we do better as a country when we make investments in communities, in people, in human capital, in infrastructure that create the conditions for long-term growth. And that equity is a much stronger platform for growth than the inequality that we've been living with over the last 30 years. So in advance of this debate of the fiscal showdown, more than 150 national organizations with the leadership of the Gamaliel Foundation, the Center for Community Change, many of our key allies in labor unions, other faith-based organizations, agreed on a 5-part agenda, 5 basic demands that we have committed to make together during this debate in the fiscal showdown. So those are, first, that we face a jobs crisis in the country and that we must create millions of jobs to restart the economy. Second, that we must ensure that there are no cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security benefits, and that we can't shift the costs of these vital programs either to their beneficiaries or to the states. Third, that we can't see cuts to the safety net and vital services for low-income people, and this particularly applies to those automatic cuts to discretionary spending that I talked about that are slated to happen later this year, that the human needs programs, whether it's housing or health care or heating assistance, that those need to be held harmless in this debate about the budget. Fourth, that we need to stop the sequester, and the sequester is those automatic, across-the-board, job-killing cuts that would devastate our communities. And fifth, that in order to address the long-term fiscal crisis this country faces, we must require the wealthy and corporations to pay their fair share, and that begins with ending tax cuts for the wealthiest 2%, people making more than $250,000 a year. Those tax cuts expire automatically at the end of this year, so really the debate here is about not renewing the tax cuts for people at the very top. Now let me just talk a little bit about some of the key components of this, and then we'll move into questions. The top issue in this election was how to get the economy growing again. A poll last week found that 49% of voters believe that the president's mandate following his reelection is to focus on jobs, on job creation. That's only compared to only 22% of voters who said the president's mandate was to reduce the deficit. Overwhelmingly, and I know you hear this in communities and at public meetings and churches all over the country, people want to see jobs and growth again in the country. So we have some ideas, and many of them emerge out of the campaigns that Gamaliel and 10 have been running for some time on how we can create millions of jobs in this country by investing in green jobs, by investing in school modernization, by investing in transportation, and particularly in public transit, by investing in caregiving jobs to address the growing need for people to care for the aging baby boom population, and to create youth jobs to ensure that our young people have opportunities. These are ideas that are ready to go, and they will help address the long-term budget deficit that the country faces, because as our country grows, as people have more income, they're able to pay more tax, which will bring down the deficit over time. I also want to say here on the social insurance programs, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, these are contracts that we have made across generations, between one generation and the next, and our people depend on them. Low-income people, women, people of color are particularly dependent on these programs, and these are programs that we have paid for, that we have earned through a lifetime of work. And we want to make sure that there are no cuts to these benefits that people rely on, and that includes not raising the retirement age on, for example, Medicare or Social Security. So you hear some people say, well, everybody is living longer in America, so of course people should work longer. Well, that's not true. The bottom half of the income distribution in America is actually not seeing increases in life expectancy. It is people at the very top who are experiencing dramatic increases in their longevity. In fact, some groups of people in the lower end are actually seeing declines in their life expectancy. So we don't want to have benefit cuts. We don't want to raise the retirement age. Those are, and obviously these other points are critical as well about tax fairness. We cannot have a decent society in America unless we have adequate revenue, and the fight about revenue is one that we must engage with as part of this debate. So as we insist on all these particular policy proposals about job creation, about protecting the safety net, about defending the social insurance programs, about increasing taxes on the wealthy, we also need to make sure that we're educating people about our long-term vision for shared prosperity in the country, educating our members and the broader public about what an investment agenda should look like and what a jobs as opposed to austerity paradigm should look like. So just in conclusion, I'll say that we're really facing a moment in truth about the economic direction of our country that will have implications for generations of people. It won't all play out in the lame duck, although it will begin just as you are arriving here in Washington, D.C. But the debate is going to continue for a year or two. Gamaliel's Leadership Assembly in Washington next week could not come at a more important time. Your voice, the fire of faith, is critical to ensuring that we get a just and fair outcome for people all across this country. So I really appreciate the work the network is doing, and I look forward to your questions and to working with you in the weeks and months to come.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deepak. Now I'm going to turn it over to Davin so that he can manage the questions. So, like I say, you could either raise your hands and Davin would unmute. We are not able to unmute everyone. There's too many people. But if you raise your hands, he'll be able to handle that, or also type your questions, and then he'll pass it on to Deepak. So that, Davin, I'm turning it over to you, and the Q&A is open. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Thank you, Deepak. Like Anna said, if you have a question and you'd like to ask it via audio, you can raise your hand using the control panel. And if you'd rather just type your question, you can use the question box that should also be on the control panel. So if you have any questions, please submit them or raise your hand, and we'll spend 10 minutes on this.
Yeah, I've got a question, Davin. I just wanted to ask Deepak what impact that this debate can have on funding for infrastructure, such as high-speed rail. I know a lot of our affiliates around the country are working on community benefits agreements and other projects that are dependent upon funding for high-speed rail. So just wanted to ask, is that part of the debate as well?
Yes, it's potentially the case that a grand bargain, which would be a 10-year kind of master agreement on how much revenue would be raised, on investments the country would make, on benefit programs and social insurance programs, would touch every part of the budget, from defense to infrastructure to human services to tax rates and tax reform. So we could well see a package that limits the ability of the federal government to make the kinds of investments like high-speed rail that are incredibly important both in generating jobs and opportunity, in addressing environmental concerns, in creating opportunities for mobility for people in central city neighborhoods to access other job opportunities in other areas. So I think it is very important for you all to emphasize the infrastructure investment agenda that you have developed as part of this jobs thrust. That is a critical way in which we can address the jobs crisis in America, and it is a piece of a strategy to address the deficit in the country. So I really think that's a very important piece to raise in your visits with members of Congress when you're in Washington next week and on an ongoing basis back at home.
Okay, great. Thank you, Deepak, and thank you, Sam. We have a few more questions coming in. I believe the first one I saw come up was Mary Malinowski, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now, Mary. Mary, are you there?
Yes, I'm Marie.
Go ahead.
I'm here. Yeah, I just want to say that, without the buses, we would not be able to get the jobs. I think it's important to really keep on, especially the NFTA in our area, to understand, and legislators to understand that we don't have the buses. They do a lot of cuts. We can't get jobs. There's not a lot of places we could go.
That's a great point, Marie. Thank you for making it, and thank you for the campaigns that you're running and your colleagues and compatriots all over the country are running to increase access to transit options. That's really exactly why this debate that is happening in Washington, where you read on the paper and you see on TV the president negotiating with Republicans, the staff people on the Hill talking about what kind of deal they can cut, because as they look to reduce the deficit by as much as $4 trillion, which is a target that they've talked about over the next 10 years, the question is really going to be, are they going to cut funding for local transit options for transportation, or will there be increased taxes on people making over $250,000 a year? Will we go back to the tax rates those people paid back in the 90s when we had a booming economy and they weren't complaining and the country was had many more jobs than a much higher rate of growth than it does today. So I think your point is really important to bring home to decision makers, to Congress people, to their staffs, that these choices have real consequences for human beings, like can you get to a job? Can you keep a job? Can you, as a young person, go to college? Can you get to college? All these questions are really what's at stake in this debate about the so-called fiscal cliff.
Okay, great, thanks. We've got a lot more questions now. The next one is from Laura Barrett. She asks, what is a unique contribution that Gamaliel can make to this campaign? What is your advice to our network?
I think there are two things that Gamaliel can do that are critical. One is you are pioneering. You are leading the way in the country on strategies for creating jobs, particularly in hard-hit areas of the country, in communities of color, good jobs that pay a decent wage. And I think lifting up that experience and the concrete wins that you have achieved and speaking about the need for Congress and decision makers to build on that track record by making further investments in infrastructure, not cutting, not austerity, but investment that creates jobs that allow people to have a decent life. That's one aspect. The second really speaks to the Fire of Faith campaign, which I had the pleasure to be at the launch of, and where I feel like the speaking, as Gamaliel can do powerfully from a faith perspective about the moral decisions that policymakers will be making. Are we going to balance this budget on the backs of poor people, working class people, middle class people, elders? Is that what we're going to do? Or are we going to ask the wealthiest people in this country to pay their fair share, to come from and speak from the deeply rooted faith traditions, which the Gamaliel Network does, is, I think, a very important contribution and voice to have in those debates. So those are two things that I think that the network could lead with. Okay,
great. Let's try to get through the rest of these real quick. The next question is from Fred Thielen. I may not be saying that right. How does the fiscal cliff debate intersect with the call for comprehensive immigration reform?
Great question. So the president has said repeatedly, and Republicans in Congress have, in the wake of the election results, said that they too want to move on immigration reform in 2013. The Gamaliel Foundation and CCC have been pushing for immigration reform for a very long time, and this may be our window to get it done, but it won't happen automatically. The intersection with the fiscal cliff debate, I think, is that if the debate goes on for months and months and it consumes all of the energy of policymakers and the press and the president well into 2013, that there is a risk that it can derail a potential debate about immigration reform. We are pushing very hard that the debate about immigration needs to begin immediately in January when a new Congress comes back, when a new president, this president, is inaugurated again for the second time, that there need to be hearings, there needs to be a bill, et cetera, that there can be no excuses for not moving forward on this human rights, social justice priority for the country, and that immigration reform is an important piece of contributing to the country's economic vitality and energy, that it will strengthen the tax base, strengthen the fiscal position, strengthen the economy. The immigrants have a crucial role to play in getting the country back on a sound economic footing, and immigration reform will help do that. So that's the argument we're making, and it's critically important that in the conversations and visits that you all have over the next few months, that you speak to the importance of a path to citizenship for 11 million undocumented people in this country as a critical solution.
Okay. The next question is from Reverend Dennis Jacobson, who asks, can Congress decide not to decide, essentially to continue temporarily with tax cuts and stop the sequester while they engage in prolonged debate?
Yes, there is certainly a scenario under which Congress would do a series of kind of patchwork deals, perhaps a few months at a time, extend the debt ceiling, extend the tax cuts, hold off the sequester, the automatic cuts that we were talking about for a few months, and try and revisit it over and over again. I think that would be result in a disastrous set of cuts and outcomes for those of us who care about social justice and equity in the debate. It seems as though the president is saying that he wants to not extend the tax cuts even for 1 minute for the wealthiest into 2013. And that is really a crucial point here, because if he wins that, that will force a better deal for us, because there'll be more revenue coming in. And also, hopefully, it's crucial that he and other members of Congress be willing, if necessary, to go over this so-called fiscal cliff, which is really not a cliff. It's more like a slope. The world will not end if Congress does not achieve a deal by the end of the year. That what will happen is there will be massive new revenues coming to the federal government because these tax cuts will expire for everyone. And one might argue that at that point we have more leverage for a progressive solution. So if a deal can't be done, a good deal can't be done, that is fair to jobs, that is fair to the middle class, the working class, the poor, between now and December, our view is that there shouldn't be a deal, that we should force consideration and inclusion of fair revenue and these other planks in any deal that goes forward. So yes, it is possible that this could continue for some time, but that is not a desirable outcome for us.
Okay. We just have two more questions. The first is from Laura Barrett again, who asks, how can we make sure the Missouri model is used?
Well, I think it needs champions in Congress and in the White House, which I know is looking for places to point to in terms of concrete, tangible things that can be done about jobs and job creation, and the Missouri model really is just that kind of approach, that kind of model. So I think it's a combination of lifting it up even further in the media so that it gets visibility as this debate unfolds, and having members of Congress and decision makers in the administration point to it repeatedly as a key part, as a model we can build on to address the jobs crisis in the country and thereby deal with the fiscal cliff. So I think greater visibility, having public officials and the press talk about it is a very important piece of the strategy.
Okay, and the final question comes from Grady Holmes Jr. Is the debate about the fiscal cliff going to affect more funding for local communities with high crime rates to create local jobs and assistance to reduce crime?
It's a good question. I would say right now what's being talked about is cutting back on programs that support communities that are dealing with very high rates of poverty, high rates of incarceration, high rates of crime, etc. So the risk is that in trying to cut the federal deficit, Congress will actually reduce investments to needed programs that help young people go to school and stay out of trouble, that help to ensure that communities are safe and secure, that there are jobs for people to hold, etc. So that's exactly why the network's participation in this debate is so critical, because what really you will be pushing for is an alternative to that idea that we can cut our way to a prosperous America, that we can slash programs and expect good results. You will be arguing for a strategy to invest in things like transportation and high-speed rail and the Missouri model, in key social supports and programs that give people opportunity to have a better life. But that's how we're going to get a growing economy in the U.S. again. So that's why your voice is so very important.
Okay, great. Thank you, Deepak.
Well,
thank you all so much. It's great to work with you, and thank you for the amazing work that you do at the local level. And I'm so glad you'll be here in Washington and making your voices heard.
am I on?
Yep, we can hear you, Anna.
Okay, Deepak,
Yes.
he left us.
No, I'm still here, Anna.
I just wanted to remind everyone and maybe encourage those who have not read it. Your article in the Poverty and Race titled Social Justice Movements in a Liminal Age. And I just had the opportunity to reread it again this week in preparation for the conversation at Harvard with John Powell on his new book, Chasing to Justice. And so I hope that you still believe that we are in a liminal age.
I do. It's a time of great possibility, but we will only get to that possibility and realize it through the kind of organizing that the Gamaliel Network is doing. So thank you for your leadership, Anna, and thank you to everybody in the network for the work that you are doing.
Thank you. Go catch a train. And I'm going to turn it over to Sam, who is going to prepare us and move us into the actual D.C. visit. So he's going to walk through Wednesday and Thursday next week and give us a little snapshot of the action that will take place at Prayer Vigil. So Sam, take it on.
All right, everybody, I'm Sam Finkelstein, the field director for Gamaliel Network, and I'm just going to, as Anna said, I'm going to walk through the 2 days that we're going to be together, starting with Wednesday the 5th. So you should see on your screen the beginning of the agenda for Wednesday the 5th. So basically the first day is going to be our meetings with ourselves. So we're going to, we'll start and have some high-level conversations about the direction of the network for, the second and third years of the Fire of Faith campaign. It'll be a really exciting conversation. We have some allies from the Communication Workers of America, Larry Cohen, who is the president, who really supported our work around getting out the vote this year. And we're going to talk about how we're rekindling our congregations, rekindling the economy, and rekindling our democracy through our work over the next 2 years. But right off the bat, we're going to get on the bus and do an action to energize us for the 2 days that we're together. So I'm going to tell a little bit about this. Don't want to go into too much detail, but we're going to be having a prayer vigil in the Hart Senate building. As Deepak said, this time that we're in D.C. is a really critical time because they're just going to be starting the formal debate around the fiscal showdown. So we're going to be in the building where they're debating this at noon, which is the lunch hour, as these people are leaving their debate to go grab some food. We'll be right in the center of the building with some of our partners from a local organization called Our DC, who are going to be joining us. They represent unemployed, low-wage workers that are very concerned about this issue as well. So we're going to do some prayer. We're going to bring the fire of our faith and really light up the building with a prayer vigil. Hopefully some of our legislators will be joining us, and we're going to pray that Congress listens to the voice of the people and of workers and pursue a policy that doesn't focus on austerity, but that instead creates jobs by investing in communities. So it should be a really fun, powerful, exciting action. And then we're going to get back on the hotel and head back on the bus and head back to the hotel and continue some of these meetings with ourselves, as we call it. So we're going to break into breakout groups in our 4 major issue areas within the Fire of Faith campaign nationally, that being education, jobs and transportation, immigration, and criminal justice reform. So as you can see on your screen, we've got not a whole lot of time, but we got a chunk of time to come together with the key leadership of those groups and start to plan what are some key pressure points for the next couple of years, what's the policies we want to do, what are our base building strategies in each of those 4 areas. So you guys should start thinking within your organization what, how you're going to split up to cover those 4 issue areas. And then we're going to come back together briefly and then split up again. And this time we're going to split up into 2 groups, one being rekindling our congregations, where we are going to be focusing on our key base building work over the next couple of years of how do we strengthen and build our congregations, which are the base for all of our work around everything we do. So continuing that conversation. And then the other breakout group is rekindling our democracy, which is going to be looking at how do we continue our civic engagement work in 2013, which is not an election year. Most people said that they don't want this to be a 1 year during election year and then we're done. How do we continue our political organizing in an off year, and then also in 2014, which is an election year? What is this going to look like? Talk a little bit about the technology and the tools, evaluate how it went in 2012. So again, for this second breakout that you're seeing on your screen at 3:30, you should think within your organizations coming, we would like you to split and have somebody participate in the congregation group and in the democracy group. So that's something you guys should start thinking about before you come, that your organization, if there's more than one person attending the retreat, can participate in both of these breakouts. So, and then finally, we move into some other high-level conversations about everyone together looking at the the next couple of years of this campaign, and that is Wednesday. And then we'll get lots of rest and be ready for Thursday, which is going to be a really powerful day. So Thursday is going to be some meetings with our key decision makers around the fiscal showdown debate, as well as all of the issues that we work on. So we're going to start off the day with a meeting with the White House, with the administration. And so we're going to be meeting with key domestic policy advisors and cabinet department heads to really raise up, what does our faith values tell us is the appropriate solution for this fiscal showdown, and to really deepen our relationships and move both our local and our national issues. And then of course, we're going to blanket Capitol Hill, and we're going to go meet with as many legislators as we can, both, again, to build these relationships, to push on the fiscal showdown solutions that we believe in, and also to move our local and national issues. And we'll do an evaluation. We realize we want to get as much out of this time on the Hill as possible. So we're talking about identifying representatives from states to come to the evaluation, so that one person can come represent your organization. We don't have to have stop everybody from their legislative visits. People can continue to meet, and we can do an evaluation process. But we'll be talking more about that when folks come together in DC. So that's the agenda. I know I went through that really quickly, but that agenda is available online, as well as in this PowerPoint, which will be sent around. But I want to just go over a few key points here to kind of your checklist. The most important thing is what is up on top, is your meetings with your members of Congress. You're spending a lot of money. People are taking off of work to come to Washington, D.C. We need to pack this with meetings. Otherwise, we're all wasting all of our time and energy. So hopefully you've got these meetings starting to be scheduled. You want to let Cynthia Gerald know that information. Her email address is on your screen if you don't have it already. And if you need help and support setting up these meetings, you can reach out to Cynthia as well. And then the second thing is that as we go into these meetings, we want to be able to communicate all of this amazing work we've done in the first 6 months of the Fire of Faith campaign. We did 30 public meetings, estimated, 25,000 people in all of these meetings. So it's really important. We've been reaching out to you, but to send Cynthia an email with any press that you got, what are some key victories, how many people did you register to vote, just throw information at Cynthia and we'll sort through it. But we want to be able to hand all the press clippings to the White House when we go there. And then here, the fourth point is that, since the action is a prayer vigil, if you have clergy attire if you have robes or collars that you wear, so please bring them. That'll make a really powerful image for the media, and give us the legitimacy of the faith leaders that we are. Another point here is to make sure to bring your official ID. You can't get into the White House without an ID. The joke in the office is that unless you're Dr. Ann Smith, who somehow was able to do that once in the past, but we're not going to count on that happening again. So everyone, bring your ID so that you can get into the White House. And then, we also want to, if you have arrival and departure information, to get that information to Cynthia as well, so that if you're there a couple hours early, we might be able to squeeze in another meeting with the Department of Transportation or the Department of Justice. So we want to use as much time as we have. So let Cynthia know that information. And then finally, if you have not registered, you got to register today. We need to let the White House and other folks know how many people to arrange rooms. So you've got to register by the end of the day today, and make sure to that everyone in your organization who's supposed to be attending is registered as well. So that was my really quick run through of the agenda and the checklist. But I want to say we've got a couple minutes here if we've got some questions about the event itself. And Davin, you're going to have to facilitate these questions because I've lost access to this.
Okay. Well, first off, Jay Schmidt would like us to remind people to get their identity information to Karen Kelsey by the end of the day, Thursday, for the meeting at the White House.
Okay, and so just to clarify on that, to get into the White House, you do need to have your Social Security number to them. They have to, I'm not sure what kind of background check they do, but they just want to have that information on file. So so you can call Karen at the office there, and and you can give it to her over the phone if you don't want to put that in email, and we'll keep this under lock and key and destroy it, as soon as we're able to do that.
Okay. Susan Sneed would like to know what the official clergy color is.
Well, that is not something that we have discussed, but I also see here that there's a suggestion that it be red, and so let's if anybody objects to red. What's that, Anna?
No, that was Anna. I think we are going to bring a Fire of Faith T-shirt, and of course they are the blue with the red Fire of Faith. Most of you have seen them already. But I do think that at least for the prayer vigil we're going to have a T-shirt. But at least for the visit, it would be nice. For the clergy, those for your tradition have color, that would be great. For the rest of us, if we could be red, if you don't feel comfortable wearing a T-shirt to go see your congressperson or to go to an official meeting with a cabinet member, then it would be good if we can be consistent and just be red.
And I see here Reverend Susan Sneed is telling me that red is the color of the Holy Spirit. So I like that. Let's go with red for if you have options in terms of your official in terms of your clergy attire. Otherwise, as Anna said, we will have T-shirts, and it's whatever you're comfortable in terms of your clergy attire is great. So. Is there any other specific questions about the agenda or the action or what you're supposed to bring and pull together for this trip to D.C.? All right. Well, so if a question hits you, as soon as you hang up the phone, you can see Cynthia's email on there. I think 5 times on your screen in different places. So just shoot her an email or pick up the phone and call one of us. And we're really excited for you all to be in D.C. with us together and to really make a dent around this policy that Deepak was sharing with us. This slideshow will be emailed out. And Davin, can you give us an update on when and how that happens?
Well, actually, I'm recording the audio and video of the whole thing, so I'll post that on YouTube tonight, and you can just rewatch the whole thing if you want, or I could send around both. either way.
Okay, so we're going to be doing an e-blast later this week, one more action alert over email, and we'll create a sidebar in that e-blast that has a link to the actual video of this conversation as well as the PowerPoint presentation itself. So keep an eye out for that email coming this week. And I'm seeing one more question around what time folks should arrive. The event itself is starting on the morning of the 5th. A lot of people are coming in from the night before because we're starting first thing in the morning on the 5th. So that's why this question about when you're actually getting in. But we're starting at, I think we said it's if we can go up to the first day here, Mario. I think we said it was 10 a.m. or it might even been 9 a.m. here on the.
Sam?
Yes.
This is
9 a.m. on Wednesday the 5th. So Marie, I know you. That was your question there. So whatever time you need to get into town to make sure that you're there for 9 a.m., likely it'll be the night before. Sorry, go ahead, Anna.
And Sam, I just wanted, if Reverend Jacobson, I know that there's a lot of religious leaders on the call, and I just wanted a little bit, just 2 minutes. I know, Reverend Jacobson, I didn't call you about this, but it just dawned on me that you do start on the 4th, that there's a religious steering committee meeting on the 4th, so I don't know if you had anything to say about that.
Oh, he's on mute, probably. Let's see. Davin, can you unmute Reverend Jacobson?
Not immediately seeing him.
While you're doing that, just to clarify what Anna's referring to, the Gamaliel National Clergy Caucus is having a meeting at 4 p.m. I know there's been a little confusion, people asking whether they should be there or not. My understanding is that if you're supposed to be at that meeting, you would likely know that you're supposed to be at that meeting. But Reverend Jacobson, if that's incorrect, and we can't unmute you, if you wouldn't mind typing a comment in saying, you're wrong.
I don't see Reverend Jacobson on here. I do see Reverend James Park has a question.
Oh, great. All right.
Let me unmute him. Okay, Reverend Park, you're on.
Go ahead, Padre. Not hearing you. Oh.
Okay, we have a question from John Norton.
Okay, so John Norton clarified that the Gamaliel National Clergy Caucus meeting is by invitation only. So if you don't know that you're supposed to be there, you're not supposed to be there. So sorry for adding that confusion into this. There's a specific set of people that know that they should be there. But the Fire of Faith retreat starts on December 5th. There's some people have other things before and after, but we're starting on December 5th at 9 a.m. And Father Parks, if you want to type your question in lieu of trying to unmute you, that may make it a little easier. All right, well, Anna, I'm going to pass it back to you. And again, like I said, if people have specific questions, feel free to reach out to anyone on staff or shoot an email to Cynthia, which is you could just send it to Cynthia or cgerald@gamaliel.org. Oh, I see Reverend Parks here. This question is only my name. Okay. How do we get our ID to? Okay, I'm sorry. Reverend Parks was asking, how do we get our ID to the White House? To clarify, you need to bring your ID with you. You don't need to give it to them ahead of time. You bring it with you. But what we need to do ahead of time is get your name and information. And so Karen Kelsey is collecting that name and collecting that information so we can get that to the White House. So, Father Parks, if you have registered, you should be getting an email from Karen with a specific set of questions with your birthday and other key questions that you can either reply via email or call her. So everyone who's registered should make sure to look at keep an eye on their email because we'll really need that by the end of Thursday, as Jay alluded to. Great. I think that's the extent of the questions. Father Parks says thanks. So I think
okay.
we're
Well, this is Anna, and thank you so much. We have 95 as of this morning. When I looked at the participants, there were 95 leaders and organizers registered for this important event in D.C. As you heard, Deepak, this is the right time, and we are the right people to be there. There were over 50 people on this call, and the security information needed email went out at about 1:48 this afternoon. So if you did not receive it, maybe I'll ask Karen to send it again, or if you can email, of course, Cynthia. But she did send it out to all of us who have registered at 1:48 p.m. this afternoon. So thank you so much. And again, this is a lot of moving parts. This is a very important event. There's a lot that we're trying to accomplish. And so if you have any questions, please contact the staff, Sam, Cynthia, Laura, all able to answer the questions. Also, we have your organizers. I'll start with the organizers on the ground. And if they cannot answer a question, of course, the campaign staff will be there. But this is a really major event. We're the first people who are going to have boot on the ground to really put pressure on our issue. So this is very important. So thank you all for being on the call, and we will see you next week in D.C. Thank you, Sam and Davin, and thank you, Mario and Cynthia, for organizing and putting this together.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.